Yeah, my name is Bina. I'm from Oxygen XML editor. As I mentioned in the morning, we provide tools for developing XML applications, working with different technologies, but we also were looking into authoring XML. And one of the trends that we've seen, right, and it's confirmed also by the presence at the conference here of a number of XML editors in the browser, and there is another one, Fonto XML, that just appeared this year, also in the browser. There's a move to the browser and probably also to mobile devices, right? Because every one of us has a mobile device, a smartphone or a tablet, and it's, you know, it's a problem that you probably do not have right now access to your semi-structured data in XML on that device. Now we put a lot of work into this, and I will show you where we are and what were our findings and our technology choices to be able to provide some support for XML authoring and reviewing in the browser, and especially on the mobile devices. This is our focus. I will start with an example. The author of this book was in touch with me. It's called The Language of Content Strategy by Scott Abel. It's a book that describes 52 terms used in the new area that's called content strategy. So they wanted to be able to share this information, you know, like what's content, what's transclusion, and so on. So it's a crowdsourced book. They have 52 authors that built this book, each one describing a topic, a concept. And I will show you to see how it looks like. So basically there are categories for concepts, like this core concepts part, right, with a small description, and then lists those concepts. And each concept has this structure where you have the term, what is that term, why it is important, some information about the author, and then a description, you know, a more detailed description of that part, right? And then they also get cards, 52 cards, one for each term, with with just a part of that information, right? And they also publish on the website more about the full content of the book. You know, additional resources and so on, links and so on. So the question was, can we do this in XML? And can we have people using mobile devices create such a book? Right. So over the last weekend, I spent some time to build what you will see now. Right. So basically, I split this in two parts. One is like a map, like the table of contents that contains the categories and the terms. So it looks like this in the browser. I have a link that points to that file, to the root, to the table of contents, and this links to different topics. This one, for instance, is the description of content, and we have what is this, why is this important. And let's make sure that, you know, so if you put this side by side, actually they look quite similar. I don't know if you can see. They look quite similar. And also we have here some actions that say show a full book on card. So if I switch to the card, I get the card layout, which, you know, looks more or less or contains the same information that you have on this card. Right? And the full mode is similar with all the information that there is available on the website, also with a picture and additional resources, a link to audio information and so on. So that's just a link in Safari on my iPad, and I can have access to this document. Right now I'm in review mode. So I was saying that we talk about XML authoring and reviewing. So in the review mode I can add comments, for instance, on this. I read something and then I can decide to select some part of the document and add a comment. Describing why I think that something should be changed, for instance. And
where do you store those annotations?
The annotations are stored within the document as processing instructions. So the change tracking information and annotation information is stored within the same XML document. And then you can receive that, with and accept, reject the change, or act on those comments. Right now, if we swipe, we have a review panel on the left. If there are more comments and changes, we can see all of them, and we can also swipe on a change and have actions like reject, accept, or edit in this case because it's my comment. If we put this into edit mode, then on the side we have this track changes on or off. This track changes on or off option can be stored also within the document. So that when you receive a document as an author, it may be with track changes already on. And now if I add something here, it is recorded as a change. If I remove something, it is recorded as a delete change. Again, now if we go here, we see these changes on the review panel. We provide also an attributes panel with the attribute information. But these elements do not have basically any attribute. We can see this on a Bina document or a DocBook document. Now, for markup, if we want to add markup, we have these actions here. So you have the caret, and then you can also have this content completion and rename element. But in general, you can also press return, and you get the available actions, the available elements that you can insert, like a link, an emphasize, or a strong element. But that's the raw editing. But you can customize this, like putting this button here, show actions, that uses then, places actions in a line. So instead of using this pop-up with available XML elements, which may be not that user-friendly for someone that is not very technical, you can have these actions and allow them to, add a list, for instance, and add another paragraph, and add another list item to this list, and so on. And then they can maybe turn off these actions and just go and add the content here in the document. Well, it may be that I cannot connect to the server right now. Of course, this usually happens during a demo. It may, so this basically it's oh now. Oh. So the document was saved, and right now it's reloaded from the server. But this kind of user interface, also with actions and access to attribute values, like in this case when you have a link and you can edit the href value directly in the user interface instead of going to the attributes panel. It's a lot easier for people to be able to contribute this kind of content and on any device basically. An empty document, if you will if you will be the owner of this book, you will create, for instance, a topic for me. You will write the name and the term that you want me to describe and my teacher, and then you will give me this placeholder. So that I can just go and fill in the descriptions and additional resources, all that information on any device. So all these descriptions that you see here are done with CSS. Basically, if an element is empty, you can match on the empty element and add a static content that provides this kind of description information. Here you can see a data document. This has also multiple comments and changes. Here is another data document, a simplified document with different actions to add another section or delete a section. And so just to get an idea, that this kind of user interfaces can be usable by normal people. So now let's go back to actually here we can see exactly the changes that I've done earlier, right? I was editing exactly this document. So the changes are available also in the desktop version. One thing that I forgot to show is that we can use schematron validation that runs on the server and can provide you feedback. Like here, that if you add more words, you can get an error that says, please keep the number of words. Keep this under 5 words or something like that, and you have now 6 words, for instance. If you see the tooltip there.
So is it collaborative so that you can use it with more than one person at the same time?
Well, right now we do not do concurrent access on the same document, but that's one of the plans, and I will get back to this in a minute, where we discuss what choices, what technologies choices we made, because basically we run Oxygen on the server, and then when you connect with the browser, you get HTML5 and JavaScript that talks back to the server. And the HTML5 displays, renders the XML document. So basically it's possible to share the same model on the server and push 2 different views on the client. So that's one. So now back to this. You feel free to interrupt me anyway at any moment. I will be happy to take questions as we go. So you've seen this trend of moving into mobile devices. Also Wikipedia provides an application for this. Publishing for mobile devices was not existent a few years ago. Now there are many options from going to data or from dogbook to a mobile-friendly format. The main use cases that we see with this are the review process. When you have documents like, you have these topics, this book, and then you want to have people look over this and provide feedback so you can correct some things. And the traditional review process goes on the output and then tries to go back to aligning somehow the comments or annotations made on the output with the initial source. And it's not that easy sometimes, especially if you have multiple XML documents that generate a single PDF output. So we want that to be replaced with this kind of direct XML review where we store the comments directly on the XML documents, and not only comments but also changes like additions, deletions, and so on. And also, in some cases, people use Word or some other forms to collect XML data that is later on translated to XML to be part of their XML workflows. And I think we can replace some of that with this kind of authoring that can be put in place in the face of. You can have non-technical people work with this kind of user interfaces. Now, when we started to look into this more than 1 year ago, we faced, where we should go. Should we have a native application or a web application, right? And there are many issues with the native app. On devices, you need to go on each app store, and you need to develop. There are different technologies for each of them, right? On Android and on Windows phones, or iPhone, iPad. There are different technologies. So we decided to go on the web app route, especially that allows us to work on any device, not only on phones or tablets, but also on desktop, or even I have on my TV. It works also on my smart TV, basically, so you can review the documents if you want on your TV. But moving into this direction to create a web application, we wanted to make sure that it works on mobile devices first, because it's easier to move from mobile to desktop than to move from a desktop to a mobile device. There are different ways of interacting. There are different requirements, basically, for this kind of user interface. Another problem that we faced was that we didn't want to reinvent everything, because if you start to work from scratch on a completely entirely new framework in JavaScript, for instance, you are missing technologies that are already available, an entire technology stack that is already available in Java, for instance, what we use now. And some parts that were already built by us for Oxygen. So we wanted to reuse all that. So that was the choice, to have server-side processing rather than a client-side processing for this. So the client side, basically, it's concerned only with rendering of the document. You can think of that as a remote display of the document. Although we push some parts on the client side, for instance, when you type, we put what you type directly on the client, and later on the server will acknowledge that what you have is correct, or will tell you that you need to replace that. For instance, if you type initially and you have track changes on, the initial characters will be inserted without track changes, but then the server will correct that and will make that information with track changes that you just entered. But that avoids, getting to the server all the time. And there are a lot of places where we can optimize this communication. On rendering the XML, we were also looking into different possibilities. One of them was trying to put the XML directly within the HTML document, but you hit, the problems that the browsers will change what you have in the DOM, depending on their knowledge that the table is a special element. So if you have a table in notebook, the browser will mess that, and you will not have what you expect to have. Another approach was to draw on the canvas, and we explored this direction because Oxygen also works within Eclipse, and that is based on a different technology for the graphical user interface, SWT. and the Java is based on Spring, so we already had an abstract layer to be able to paint what you see in Oxygen and have that on Eclipse and on Spring, on Java. And we implemented the same for the browser, basically, based on Canvas. But then there are issues that you need to have the current management in that picture, basically, and then the events, and you do not have multi-threading in the browser, so it gets too complicated. So then we decided that the best approach would be to convert to HTML5 and then convert the existing CSS that we have for rendering the XML document to a CSS that renders the converted document. So that's basically what happens, and once you have something that works in Oxygen, you can just push a button and have the same working in the browser. This is the current architecture where we have Oxygen running on the server side. You can have frameworks, means a collection of resources to support an XML language, like book, like this book, or like data, and so on, like schemas, CSS style sheets, custom operations, and so on. That can be done. That's a framework, and you can reuse that. You can reuse Oxygen plugins, and the most important one is are plugins that connect to external repositories. So if those plugins provide actually a URL implementation, a URL handler implementation, and allow Oxygen to read and write from external storages. So the advantages of this approach was that we reused almost all the existing support. As I mentioned, the CSS used to render the XML is converted automatically to match the generated HTML5 code. We have custom actions and validation that runs on the server. So we can we can have RelaxNG, Schematron, and all technologies that we support already available also for the browser part. Because it's only the display on the browser, it's battery friendly. The processing, all intensive processing is done on the server. You just, the device just sends the changes that we make and receive some feedback from the server, that's all. And the potential to collaborative editing that you also noticed is there because the model is on the server. And reuse the plugins. Disadvantages with this approach is that the major one that I found was that I do not really like HTML5 and JavaScript development. It is not the ideal platform for developing an application. I mean, there are so many differences between different browsers, different platforms, the same browser on different platforms, and so on and so on and so on. Yes?
Did you have a look at some of the newer JavaScript frameworks like Angular, this kind of thing?
Well, we use jQuery mobile for this user interface, and one idea will be to experiment also with other frameworks or other types of user interfaces, because that also is just like a template that we push information into. The network connection is required, so although I'm thinking that we can use the offline mode and accept, for instance, at least in a first phase, accept text only in elements that already contain text, because that probably the display will remain the same, so it will be easy to accept text in those, and when the connection is restored to the server, just update the server with the new content. So performance may suffer on very slow connections. That's one problem. And I mentioned, and you've seen that some of the actions, custom actions, work already, but those actions do not show any user interface, right? if you show a user interface and you develop a custom action in Oxygen, that will not immediately work. That will be based on Swing or SWT, so you need to provide also web implementation for, like when you insert a table, you want to show a dialog, right? You need to provide that dialog in some form to work in the browser. Another interesting part is that you can interact with the document also through the speech recognition or handwritten recognition. And I have a video that shows this, and I can post this on the Twitter feed. It works on TV, laptop, basically on any device. For the future, I want to try to show, that we can have this kind of projects like this book built with this kind of technology to experiment to see, what it will take, what will be the advantages of using XML for a weblog. Because once we solve the authoring problem and we make that easier, then we can have an XML-based weblog and then see, what can we do with that information that right now is not possible. Right? We can feed that into Marlogic and do different things, right? Or an XML-based wiki. Our next plan is to integrate with Google Drive and Dropbox and other external storages. And as I mentioned, offer different alternative user interfaces for this. Right now we use jQuery Mobile. And also exploring if we need more access on the platform, we can think of a hybrid application that embeds a browser, but then adds also additional functionality. And the collaborative editing. So I think we have 4 minutes for questions. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
So you're saying that it's battery friendly to implement this on the server. But have you actually tested this? Because it would appear to me that not using the network connection will save much more battery than implementing it in JavaScript, only saving the network access and using an engine that is very much optimized for aligning computations at a very battery-friendly interval.
Well, if we had implemented this in JavaScript, for instance.
No, that's not really my question. My question is really, have you tested it that it's more battery-friendly?
But how can you test that? You need to have an implementation that runs only on the browser and test with the one that runs on the server, right?
Comparing any editor with an editor that uses network connectivity for everything.
Well, actually, we do not need a network only if you actually work. So if you leave the document alone, will not connect to the network. But I haven't tested that.
Okay.
Because if I would have, so my thinking would have been, I can test if we will do an implementation in JavaScript compared with, and if we will do an implementation for this in JavaScript, probably the validation part and all that, we may not be, initially at least, in a couple of years, make that very lightweight, on the client side. So in our case, of course, it's if you can do that immediately and very lightweight, probably, I don't know. But yeah.
Any more questions? Tom? There's a lot of extensibility in the authoring Oxygen, the Oxygen authoring framework that you can create. You can create extra Java add-on classes and so on. How does that translate across to the mobile experience?
Well, if you, as I said, if all your actions that you created do not have a user interface, they already work. For instance, if you customize a framework that when you type text where text is not allowed to automatically wrap that with some element, that works already.
So it's working with the standard Oxygen actions, but what about custom actions? Is there any support for custom actions?
Yes, the same custom actions that we develop in Oxygen are working here. So in this case, for instance, you've seen that it's the same framework. There are the same actions here, right? Like inserting this list, or there are the same actions from the standard Oxygen that I triggered from the iPad. They are not different. These are custom actions. They are not just available. I built them basically. Yes.
Not so much a question, more a statement. When we wrote our papers, we didn't have collaboration in Google Drive. It was really handy. Then at the end, went to DocBook. What we'd like to see in the future, for maybe next year's papers, especially helping Charles, is really good online collaborative DocBook editing, where multiple people can edit at the same time. He can review them, see exactly WYSIWYG, how it's going to look on the final PDF or final whatever. That would be nice for us, it would be nice, it would be super nice for Charles who's killed himself. If you could do that, that would be really nice, thanks.
Of course, we already support book editing in this interface.
Collaboration and
Yeah,
the final, exactly like PDF or whatever. Big ask, I know.
What to do with this scholarship?
It will be too easy.
Wrong DIY.
Okay. Any other questions? Anyway, if you get something, you know, after this, you can find us also at in the conference area.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.